All right. Well, it's good to be here with you folks. And for Fargo, the storm seeming to be a no-show. But between here and where we live in western Manitoba, we're glad we came the day early because of the ice and the blowing snow and the conditions. Let's open up with a word of prayer and then we'll begin. Lord Jesus, we come before you this morning. We're honored and we are grateful that we are here to worship, to study, to learn. We pray that you would give us an understanding, give us clarity of thought, give us clarity of speech, and allow us, Lord, to be your ambassadors for who you are right here, right now in this community. We give you thanks for your goodness to us, Jesus. Amen. Well, right before I came up, my wife was looking at the YouTube stream, and interesting to see how many people were already there watching. We have people from India, from Maryland, from Indiana, Audrey RV and the gang from Alberta, Corgi Hollows from Minnesota, the Twin Cities area. So there's a lot of different folks from all over the country and indeed around the world watching. So this is good. This is very, very good. This morning's speech is entitled Game of Gods, and it's a breakdown of sorts of what my book is about. For the last 20 plus years, I've been helping other authors do the research for their books, for their materials, and finally, I did one on our own. And so today I'm going to break down some of the key thoughts behind what I'm presenting in my book, and I'm hoping it's going to spur you to think deeply about how our world is changing, and about how we can be ambassadors for Christ in this changing world. And I'm going to bring some ideas to you that may be fairly new. And in some respects, what you're getting is a snapshot of a 20-hour lecture series. Yes, 20-hour lecture series that I give to Miller College of the Bible. They have me come in once every couple of years to do a modular course on secular and pagan trends to the student body at their college. And so this is a snapshot of what is in that 20-hour course. The type of research I do, I guess the best way of saying it is I do old school research, boots on the ground. I go to where the action is, I observe, I try to understand it, to analyze it, to spend time interacting with people. And here's a small list of some of the events I've been to over the years. And the next 3 talks I'll be giving will carry over with some of the research I've done in places like Burning Man. Towards the end of this conference, I'll be talking about that. The Parliament of World Religions, interfaithism, global governance, all of this will come into play. But this gives you an idea. We actually go to where change is taking place. We go to where transformation is happening in real time. We observe it. We try to understand it. We interact with the people and then bring that forward so that you have a direct understanding of the times we live in. Why? Why do this? What's the point? What's the point of even a conference like this? Consider a few things. First, so that you're not uninformed as to the direction of our culture. Ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance is just ignorant. And naivety is not a virtue. We are called to be wise. And so we're doing this in part so that you're not uninformed. So you have an understanding. You understand the direction of our society. You see past the hype. You see past the rumors, past the clickbait. Boy, we have clickbait. You go past the sensational to try to understand this at a more in-depth and realistic level. Second, to connect the dots in your own life. When I give this presentation and I give the talk I do to the Miller College, I'm always amazed by how many people come up to me later, even in private, and saying, well, this helps me understand why my family is doing what they're doing, or why my kids are doing what they're doing, or why my workplace is changing the way it is. So that's important too, because you're going to see how this dovetails in your own life in different ways. And then to be warned so that you're not a gullible participant. That's a big one right there. You're not a gullible participant. So you and the church that you attend, hopefully you're attending a church, don't succumb. And I know it's hard now to find churches that haven't succumbed to the world, but so you have an understanding of that, so you're warned to that effect. And when our churches do adopt the world's point of view, and they have, wow, we see a lot of that. In fact, this is a conversation we just had a few minutes ago with a couple of people in the back. So you have a reference point to begin to interact and to understand where they're coming from, and then not to react to that, but to respond. And there's a difference. A couple more quick points. So you understand where the Christian message is being challenged. This is important. So you can recognize also when the culture is preaching to you, because all we're seeing is simply a repackaging of really the lie of Genesis chapter 6, or pardon me, Genesis chapter 3, over and over again, a repackaging of that same lie. And to understand how that is being sold to you. So you're responsible and equipped to be able to interact with your family, for youth leaders, pastors, their congregations, your youth groups. And this is really important, so you can become an effective ambassador for Christ. 2 Corinthians says this. This is Paul speaking. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were pleading through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God, for he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Okay, what does this look like? What does this mean to be an ambassador for Christ? First of all, the Apostle Paul uses a lot of comparative language. He uses the language of being an athlete, of being a farmer, being a soldier. We get that. I grew up on a grain farm. I understand what that's like to say when Paul talks about being a farm laborer. Even though I might be the slowest guy on the track, I know what it means to talk about being an athlete, using that metaphor. I've never been in combat, but we know what it means to be a soldier. We understand it. But what does an ambassador do? Has anybody in this room been a part of the community? That doesn't surprise me, not a single hand. I've asked this question numerous times, and very rarely does a hand come up. So, can you tell me what an ambassador does? What is it that an ambassador is charged with doing? What is your duty? You are called to be an ambassador. That's a high calling. What does it mean? Years ago, I spent some time at a Chicago Council on Foreign Relations event where we had a U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia giving us some lectures, giving us a presentation. He was on his way to his position in Saudi Arabia, and he broke down for us what it meant to be an ambassador. And as I walked away from that event, I was shaking my head going, wow, this helps me understand this passage that Paul is giving us, where he talks about us being ambassador. So I've taken the ambassador from the U.S. to Saudi Arabia, his talk, I'm giving it to you in bullet points here on this slide as we break down what it means to be an ambassador for Christ as a Christian, in Christian language and Christianese. So here we go. You are an ambassador. What does this mean for you? First, you are the official and legal representative of your king. When the U.S. ambassador is traveling to another land, he is an official, legal representative of your government. For you as Christians, you are literally the legal representative of the King of Kings. That, ladies and gentlemen, is an incredible calling. I can't think of anything more honoring and spectacular than that. You are literally called to this high position. And you are called to be a part of God's diplomatic community to a foreign land. You're in the world, but you're not of the world. You are an ambassador in a foreign land. And that land, we realize, is becoming increasingly hostile to the message of Jesus Christ. An ambassador needs to know the king's position and power. The ambassador's role is to understand the one he is representing, understanding the king's position and power. And then the ambassador represents his own interests and represents the king's interests and not his own interests, and subserviates his own interests to that of the king's. You understand the customs and the traditions of the land that you are finding yourself in. You realize you are set apart from that land, but you cannot be uninformed as to the character and composition of the place that you are traveling to. Why? Why do all of this? Two things. First, so you can effectively communicate the king's message. That's key. That's what you're called to do. Period. Second, this is something else that the diplomatic community does. They warn the rest of the diplomatic community. They warn the rest of the ambassadors. They warn the rest of even the nation. Look, these are the challenges coming down the pike. Be aware of this so you can be effective in your place where you have been called to. I'm going to shift gears for just a couple of minutes, but we'll be going back to the aspect of being an ambassador here in a moment. Reality, and I break this down in the book, reality is ultimately comprised of one of two ways of looking at the world or the universe. And my friend Dr. Peter Jones has really done a great job of breaking this into two components. Reality is either one or two. Reality is either everything is one, God, man, and nature are essentially the same, or reality is the biblical view of two, God, distinct, unique, utterly exalted, completely different than the created order. It's God and everything else. By the way, this God, you will not be able to imagine this God, to create this God, or somehow compose this God, because this God can only be revealed by himself, by him revealing himself to us. You can't imagine a God outside of creation because you have no reference point to compare him to. He has to reveal himself. And that's what we see through Scripture. He is revealing himself over and over and over again. So reality is either oneness or two. And you're going to see how this has an impact in every aspect of your life, from how you think about law, religion, philosophy, culture, technology, on and on it goes. How you use these two models, these two truth claims, because they are both claims on truth, how you consider that is going to have a very major bearing on how you view a lot of different things. And Game of Gods breaks that down in a very detailed way. So first of all, our Creator is different. God is unique. He is absolutely outside of creation. And Genesis chapter 1 brings this into play. In the beginning, right there we see time. We see the beginning of time, the moment of time, the start of time. In the beginning, God created. And then you see in Genesis chapter 1 how there is a distinct categorical breakdown in the created order as well. God is outside of time, space, matter, and then as he creates, he even brings divisions and categories, values and judgments, separating points inside of the created order as well. So he creates, but he is separate from creation. He divides light and darkness, divides land, sea, and heaven. He has distinctions within species. Cattle are created after their own kinds, birds after their own kinds. There are distinctions, very important distinctions. And then there's a distinction between us and the animal world. We are created in his image, literally as image bearers of who he is on this earth. That also fits into the idea of being an ambassador. We are literally his image bearers. And there are distinctions, even with gender. If you want to understand where this gender confusion comes from, where this clash, this cultural clash is taking place, and gender and sexuality is at the heart of it, you need to look under the category of oneism. No binaries. There are no distinctions. Everything is fluid. Male, female, trans, whatever the 56 new flavors are of the day, it's all fluid. That's oneism. There are no ultimate distinctions, boundaries, or divisions. Whereas the biblical worldview says, no, there are distinctions, boundaries, and divisions. And it's when we begin transgressing, that is where we end up in problems. Isaiah chapter 40 brings out the uniqueness of God in a beautiful way. Who has measured the waters in the hollows of his hand? This is Isaiah 40, verses 12 to 18. Measured heaven with a span and calculated the dust of the earth in a measure, weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance. Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord? Or, as his counselor has taught him? With whom did he take counsel? Who instructed him and taught him in the path of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are as a drop in a bucket and are counted as a small dust on the scales. Look, he lifts up the isles as a very little thing, and Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor its beast sufficient for a burnt offering. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted by him less than nothing and worthless. To whom then will you liken God? This is the one we're representing. You're an ambassador to this king. Consider what Isaiah 40 is saying. God is being compared to nature. He's literally serving it out. He's putting it on scales. He's measuring it out. I used to do road construction. I understand the language and the flavoring of what's happening here. Nature is being displayed, and God is saying, I am above this. I can see it all. I am above this. And then compared to human wisdom. Did God call you up this morning and said, hey, what am I going to do? What should I be doing today? Tim, did God call you this morning and say, I need some counsel, I need some wisdom? No. All of humanity together, our wisdom is as nothing to him. He doesn't ask us to be his counselor. We're not the ones who taught him. It is the other way around. And then our models of worship and how the nations also are represented here demonstrate that God is above even those 2 points. The nations are as a drop in the bucket. What does that mean? What does that symbolize? Well, in that time, in that culture, you would lower a bucket down into a cistern to draw out water. And it would be those final drips that come off the end of your bucket, those meaningless, absolutely pointless drips that have no bearing at all what's in your bucket. That is how he is comparing the nations. Or as a small dust on the scales, the kind of dust that you don't have in any of your houses, the little fine stuff in the corners. It's as if there's a little bit of that fine dust on the scale. It doesn't measure at all. It doesn't even affect the scale. It's pointless. It's meaningless. But you take and you go, blow it off because you can. Because it's there. That is how God is comparing the nations to him. That's pretty powerful. I'm standing right now in North Dakota. I'm standing in the United States of America. I'm a Canadian. The United States of America is the most powerful country on the planet. At least that's what we're told over and over and over again. And yes, you are a powerhouse. There's no doubt about it. But compared to God, I'm sorry, you don't even count as a small drop that falls out of the bucket or the little dust on the scale. Canada means nothing. America means nothing to God ultimately. His power is greater than the world combined. Then what about Lebanon and how it's not sufficient to burn? The language here is this. Understand, back in that point in time, Lebanon was known for its cedar trees and for its cattle, for its riches. If you would take and mount up all the forests of Lebanon into this incredible altar to God and slaughter all the cattle of Lebanon and mount it up in this amazing display of worship, God is saying, even your model of worship doesn't come close. It would be like us tearing down every church, cathedral, and house of worship on the planet, and then taking the materials and constructing a super house, a colossal edifice so big that you would walk in and you would be dropped to your knees because of the grandeur and the beauty, and you'd be going, oh, this has to represent God. And God be going, no, your model doesn't even come close to who I am. Ladies and gentlemen, you are the ambassador of that God. Think about it. You are the legal, official representative of that God. Why do we fear man? Really, why do we fear man? God's otherness, God's supremacy is carried forth in Jesus Christ as God manifests himself in the flesh to the world. Colossians 1 tells us this, for by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. For it pleased the Father that in him all the fullness shall dwell, and by him to reconcile all things to himself by him, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross. Here we're seeing the uniqueness of God, par excellence. There is none that compares to him. Christ has the supremacy in all things, and we are his ambassadors. But oneness is displayed in the Bible. We do see oneness evident in Scripture. It is the fall. It is the problem. Romans 1:25, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator. Take some time this weekend to go through Romans chapter 1. You're going to see that as we worship creation, as we bow our knees to what is created, there are social and sexual and other issues that come in as well. The whole thing is upset. But this is an example of us looking to nature as divine. It is oneness. And then, of course, what is the lie? It is the first deception where we see the divinity of man being expressed. Genesis 3:5. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like or as God, knowing good and evil. And of course, it looked good. Adam and Eve took the fruit and walked away from the author of life. The consequence being death. But we are promised divinity. The tempter gave us this promise, you'll be as God. It's creation worshiping itself, man worshiping himself. So oneness is expressed in Scripture. It is really the essence of our fall. I'm going to take you to a couple of places just so that you see how this plays out, how the oneness worldview is in motion. Many years ago, back in 1997, I attended for the first time, it was my first boots on the ground experience with oneness, an education event called the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress. It was really an eye-opening event for myself because I saw oneness face to face. I didn't even think about it or contextualize it at that time as one or two. Dr. Peter Jones really helped me to understand and break this down, kind of intuitively what you already knew, but it was evident. Dr. Robert Mueller, who was at one time held the rank of UN Assistant Secretary General, he was our keynote speaker. And you need to understand the audience. About 300 school children, educators, social change agents were involved in this conference as we look to restructure Canada's education system to reflect what really is a onist worldview. And so we're all given symbolic global citizenship passports, and on the top of the passport it said this: you are the earth becoming conscious of herself. Unite global citizens to save and heal planet Earth. Really? We're the ones saving? We're involved in the act of redemption? We're going to save planet Earth? One thing I want you to keep in mind as I give my talks for the next 2 days is that what is really being expressed here is the world is giving you an alternative redemption story, saying no to Jesus Christ and saying you can save yourself. By saving the planet, we are saving ourselves. We can save ourselves through our politics. We'll be talking about that later today. We can save ourselves by having religions come together. We can even demonstrate how we are saving ourselves in all these different ways that we bring unity into the human experience. And so we were taught oneness. This is what Robert Mueller said to us, specifically the children. You are not children of Canada. You are really living units of the cosmos because the earth is a cosmic phenomena. We are all cosmic units. This is why religions tell you, you are divine. We are divine energy. It is in your hands whether evolution on this planet continues or not. Keep in mind his audience, school children. At one point, Robert Mueller has a dialogue with himself as Mother Earth. What are you doing to me? You are killing me. And in certain projections, which have been made by scientists now, some of them say that this earth will become lifeless and uninhabitable within the next 50 years. So do not forget, that if we continue to live and to waste and to do all the wrong things we do today, by your age, maybe this planet will be finished. Never forget this. You have to be Earth citizens. You have to be the children of Mother Earth. Well, this is oneness. And it was a powerful emotional appeal to the children in the audience. This is basically our education system today. This is the message of the world. So some of the things the schools did that participated, they came up with different ideas of how they could show that they were truly good global citizens. Different schools had different ideas. Some schools suggested we would start interfaith groups and global citizenship clubs. Some of the schools suggested what we need to do is foster Earth Pride celebrations around the idea of planetary identity. One school had something very specific, suggested that what we needed was to zero out world debt and then scrap money, replace money with a biometric Earth Points card. And that your access to healthcare, your access to education, your access to be able to interact in economics would completely depend upon your contribution to the planet, to the greater good. These are school children coming up with these ideas. I was part of a small table of educators. Most of them were college age, and they were in university looking to become teachers, and they recognized that what we were talking about was a spiritual religious worldview. And I'll never forget, I wrote this down in my notes. One of them said, what we need to do is make this a virus, no inoculation, infect everyone. And then at the end of the Congress, we had a play, a theatrical play, where Ganesha, the Hindu deity, the god who removes obstacles, came forward with his multiple arms. And Ganesha explained to the children, I have been around for thousands and thousands of years, and you can call on me any time to remove your thoughts of any obstacles. If you should ever worry or anguish, or if life gets you down, whisper an Om. Call on loving Ganesha, who is always there, for Ganesha is none other than you. We eat this stuff up. You know, one thing that I do break down in the book is how the East has come to the West, and the timelines and the structures that were in place to bring that into fruition. And this is just another example. This is what we're living now. So it's oneness. This is oneness in action. How does oneness look? Well, it's Eastern religions. It's Buddhism, it's Shintoism, it's Taoism, it's Hinduism. Even the dualistic Eastern concepts will ultimately fit under the idea of oneness. It's classical and neo-paganism. It's the idea that nature is embodied in the divine. It's the occult, through magic, through ritual, as we seek to act upon the all. Cosmic humanism, the New Age movement, even secularism. Atheism and secularism ultimately says man is the measure of all things. There is nothing else higher than man. Well, is that not oneness? Is that not the creation asserting itself, saying this is it? There is no God who is other. There is no God who is greater. This is all there is. We are the pinnacle of evolution. It's oneness. However you look at it, that becomes oneness. So we can't imagine a God outside of creation. Therefore, we refuse to acknowledge his position. By the way, as I said earlier, you can't imagine a God outside of creation. That God has to reveal himself to us. And that is a story that we see in Scripture. That is history, his story, as he reveals himself to the nation of Israel and to the world. We can't fathom a God whose existence isn't tied to natural processes. Nature has to be divine. We can't comprehend a God whose separateness, his exaltation, his holiness levels out all of humanity. King, prince, pauper, or pope, it makes no difference. In God's eyes, all have sinned. Every single person. All have fallen short of the glory of God. This idea that we are all leveled out before him also is something that doesn't fit very well with our worldview. Therefore, we bend our knees to what is created. We choose our own spirituality. we enchant ourselves. And so we are entering an era of re-enchantment. I contend in the book, this is an argument I make, we are entering the age of oneness, an era where we enchant ourselves with our divinity, our claim to divinity, and our claim that nature is divine. We literally are engaged in the age of oneness. Now, if you're in my class, this is a chart you need to know. There's no test at the end of this morning, but this chart you need to know if you're in my classroom. It's a breakdown of Western culture, Western civilization. These are epochs, major eras or eras of Western thought. At first, you have primitive paganism, and the early church was involved directly in bringing forth the gospel of Jesus Christ in an age of what we would consider primitive paganism. It is the Greco-Roman period. It is barbarianism. This is what the early church encountered. This is what they came out of. This is the time when nature is personified, when you have God, kings, and it goes up to roughly the era AD 500. Then from roughly AD 500 to 1700, we have what we could call the age of faith or Christendom, where church influences state and culture, where Christian institutions, ethics, moralities come into play. That becomes the ethos, the framework for how we do living. Whether you're a Christian or not, regardless, that is the framework we all operate under. There is an ethic. There is a Christian sensibility. And you can argue all kinds of things regarding the Reformation and so on. That's not necessarily the point, though I do get into the Reformation in the book. The bottom line is this was an age of faith. And then modernity comes into play. From roughly 1700, I use the French Revolution as the beginning point, though it could be discussed in different ways. But from roughly the French Revolution until the 1960s, actually, I make the argument until the Vietnam War ended, and I believe that probably an apt symbol of modernity's closure is the last helicopter leaving Saigon. And I take a look at what Vietnam did to the psyche and the soul of America. And it's profound, truly profound. As all of a sudden the ideas of authority and truth and what really constitutes solid ground is just shredded out from underneath the feet of American citizens. But modernism from 1700 to the 1960s, it was the omnipotence of human reason. It was Marxism, it was science, it was materialism, it was church-state separation, all that comes into play. And yes, we still have all of this to some extent today. All of this carries over in parts and pieces. And then postmodernism from the 1960s up until, I count it, roughly the year 2000. What's postmodernism? Basically the rejection of Christianity and materialism, those truth claims that were grounded on those two worldviews, materialism and Christianity. We say no to that. We said no to absolutes. We said no to any framework of authority, no to any truth claims. All we have now are questions. Postmodernism gives us nothing ultimately but questions with no ability to find answers. In fact, we're not even encouraged to find answers. You're encouraged to stay in the question. That's what postmodernism did. It created a vacuum of meaning and purpose. I contend by the year 2000, that was already on the way out. In fact, you could look back to the 1960s and see that it was already on the way out the moment it was born. And instead, what we're looking at is re-enchantment. What is re-enchantment? Well, it's not the New Age movement, though the New Age movement fits within it. The New Age movement tended to focus on the self, self-actualization, human potential, coupled to Eastern mysticism, the awakening and the awareness of your divine self. It was viewed as being personally quite shallow, without a deeper context, kind of like a type of consumerism or smorgasbord of spirituality. And it was really a marketplace form of newer alternative spirituality. Re-enchantment says something else. Instead of focusing on the I, it focuses on the we. It's community. It's togetherness. Our meaning is found in what is universal. Our meaning is found in a cosmic relationship between nature and the supernatural. We are all one in essence, and that is what is expressed. Your individualism is absorbed into purposes and meaning through the group, through wholeness, through unity. We ground ourselves in a spiritual, material communion. Everything here is viewed within this communal, we united concept. We all feel that we are part of oneness. It is experiential, and this is the new spirituality. I heard it's not cool to quote yourself, but I'm going to do it anyways. One of the arguments I make is a demonstration of how myth plays into re-enchantment. Myth is so important because in the 1960s, especially in the 1960s, we were already wrestling with, okay, where does our meaning and purpose come from? Where does truth come from? We're rejecting Christianity. We're rejecting materialism. Now, where do we find a new framework for understanding reality? This is what I write. A new context was about to be shaped through an archaic lens, one paralleling postmodernism and the New Age, yet offering a more robust setting for change. It would recognize the technical while affirming the spiritual, merging modernism into mystery and the human with the natural. It would be essentially religious, or better said, mythic, powerfully transforming the psyche of Western civilization through a new framing story. Myth, understood as an information technology, takes upon itself a propaganda quality and becomes a powerful actor for social transformation. It functions as a framing story, not as a tale or fable, but as a way to think and behave. In the 1960s and 70s, intellectuals were really wrestling with what will be the new myth. What does myth look like? How will we capture a sense of purpose and meaning? Where will we find our new direction? And so in the early 1970s, both the Club of Rome and Stanford Research Institute were both wrestling with this question. Where do we find purpose and meaning? What will the new myth look like? This is what one of the proposals to the Club of Rome said in their Goals in a Global Community report. It was published in 1977, but the report was ongoing from the early 1970s on. Listen carefully, because this points right to us, right to the Western world. It was understood that we in the West, if we would capture a new global myth, we would change the world. Western developed countries are among the best initial candidates for the myth-making project. The countries of this area will be required to make some significant and sometimes drastic shifts of perception in order for the new international order to be fulfilled. Thus, it is very important for these societies to make changes in their value systems. In addition, a shift in values in these societies should have a great impact on the rest of the world. The Western countries, therefore, appear to be very good candidates for the reception of myths about a global society. We are going to give America and the Western world a new way of thinking. If we're going to have a new international order, we all need to start thinking differently. We need a new myth that you can all accept, that you will buy into. It will be a shift in values so profound, so enormous, you will not recognize what your country looks like after the myths have been accepted. Stanford Research Institute was thinking along the same lines. SRI put out a report, Changing Images of Man. It too was in process in the early 1970s, but the report didn't get published until quite a bit later on. I believe it was in the early 80s. And in their Changing Images of Man, the new myth was recognized it would be built on first an ecological ethic, emphasizing man's involvement in the total community of nature and our oneness with all things. An ecological ethic that was first understood as the foundation of our new myth. It would be about self-realization. We would find our human potential in this new myth. It would be, in their words, multi-leveled, multifaceted, and integrative. In other words, we would embrace all forms of diversity and culture within the new myth. It would all come into this one umbrella. And it will be experiential, it will be open-ended, and it will be evolutionary. We're going to be building it on the fly. There's no real constitution, no real hardcore set of things to follow to create this myth and bring it into play into the world. We're going to let it just kind of unfold, and we're going to shape it as it goes and as you change your values in accordance with it. Ervin Laszlo, who was very involved, prominently involved in the Club of Rome report. In fact, he was the director of that report at the time, and also involved in helping bring the Changing Images of Man document into the public. And indeed, Ervin Laszlo was one of the most important system theorist thinkers of the 1970s. He put it this way in a speech to World Goodwill in 2005. Why do I think this re-enchantment of the cosmos is important? Because oneness, wholeness, has been around for thousands of years. A sense of oneness can be recovered. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the new myth. We're all one. It's an old myth. It's the ancient beginning story that says we can be as God and creation is as God. But it has a secular fitting as well. Stanford University Press in 2009 published a book, a secular book, asking the question, what does re-enchantment look like? Because we are being re-enchanted. What does re-enchantment look like? From a secular point of view, keep that in mind. I'll read you this quote. Think about how this sounds. This is religion. If the world is to be re-enchanted, it must accordingly be re-imbued not only with mystery and wonder, but also with order, perhaps even with purpose. There must be a hierarchy of significance attaching to objects and events encountered. Individual lives and moments within those lives must be susceptible again to redemption. There must be a new intelligible locus for the infinite. There must be a way of carving out within the fully profane world a set of spaces which somehow possesses the allure of the sacred. By the way, when I go to Burning Man, and on Saturday evening I'll be talking to you a little bit about that, this is it. This is literally it being played out in real time. I'm watching it, I'm there, experience it in real time, which somehow possesses the allure of the sacred. There must be everyday miracles, exceptional events which go against and perhaps even alter the accepted order of things. And there must be secular epiphanies, moments of being in which, for a brief instant, the center appears to hold, and the promise is held out of a quasi-mystical union with something larger than oneself. That's religion. We're talking about some type of a religious experience. And they are putting this within the context of a secular faith, a secular mythology, a secular sense of spirituality. This is re-enchantment. We are looking for something. We rejected Christianity. We rejected materialism because it stripped the soul of meaning. Postmodernism offered us nothing but a big vacuum. We didn't know where to go. Where are you going to look now? Where are you going to look as a culture for a new sense of purpose, a new grounding? You will go back to the past. You will return to ancient thinking. You will go back to the ideas of paganism. So what is re-enchantment? It's the creation of a new mythos, a truth claim wrapped in a grand vision or story, one about our planetary interdependence. It's a soul-like sense, a feeling of connection with natural processes. It's a pagan veneration of nature. It's our return to Gaia, our return to the mother. It's about a new meaning, grounded in a spiritualized connection, a divine destiny with the material world. In this respect, we direct our evolution as we all now evolve together with the cosmos. We could call it the sacred secular or mystical materialism. Pretty heady stuff, pretty crazy stuff. Welcome to your new age. Welcome to now. So I'm going to give you two brief examples before we close up our talk of where we see re-enchantment coming into play. And they're two different examples, but they're both important. First is on green spirituality, our green return, our return to the earth. Astronaut Dick Gordon, when he was asked, what did we discover when we went to the moon? He said this, what we discovered was the Earth. And one of the arguments I make in the book is that the Apollo moon landings and the entire Apollo space program really opened up our Western thinking to what we are here. We looked back and said, oh, where are we? What is this pale blue dot? Carl Sagan's term. And it became our point of reference as all of a sudden we went, this is our mother, this is our home. And that really comes out in the very first Earth Day. If you want to see where Re-Enchantment grabbed hold of America's soul, it's April 22nd, 1970. April 22nd, 1970, some 20 million American youth, maybe some of you in this room, participated in ecology and Earth Day activities. Thousands of schools, universities, grade schools were involved in Earth Day activities in 1970. It was introduced by Democrat Senator Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin. It was proposed as a national teach-in. It was about schools bringing this forward. Schools, education is so important because if you can grab the minds of the youth, you've got the future. That was understood when I went to the Global Citizenship Congress or conference. And in all this, a handbook was published called the Environmental Handbook. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I'll just give you two examples, or one example from it, a problem and a solution, a two-step approach. In the Environmental Handbook, it was said this, you're to blame. Christianity is the problem. What we do about ecology depends on our ideas of the man-nature relationship. More science and more technology are not going to get us out of our present ecologic crisis until we find a new religion or rethink our old one. No new set of basic values has been accepted in our society to displace those of Christianity. Hence, we shall continue to have a worsening ecologic crisis until we reject the axiom that nature has no reason for existence save to serve man. So, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of American youth, April 22nd, 1970, was sucking this up, absorbing this. Christianity is the problem. We need a new spirituality. We need a new religion. Or we have to restructure that old one of ours so that it's more focused with its allegiance to earth. And so the solution was found on page 331 in the Environmental Handbook. This handbook, by the way, was handed out to children, keep that in mind, school children. What were the new religions that could be encouraged? Gnosticism, hip Marxism, mystical Catholicism, Sufis, Quakers, Buddhism, shamanism, anarchists, alchemists. The list was long. All primitive cultures, all communal and ashram movements. This would be the new myth. Accept this because it accepts the earth. James Coburn, in 1990, said this about Earth Day. When he was interviewed, why? Why Earth Day? Mother Earth is our mother. She's the mother goddess. She's the one that we should be praising rather than raping. I mean, all these people here today are here for one purpose, one reason, because they're concerned about what's happening to the earth, what mankind is doing to the earth. What we have to be is true to ourselves. If we're true to ourselves, we'll be true to Mother Earth. Mother Earth's going to be bountiful. She's going to give us everything we need. She has for a long time. We've lost our way. The pagans used to know how to do it, and the Indians, some of them still remember how to do it. The earth is a living organism. We're killing the one we love the most, and she loves us. We've got to praise our mother goddess. That's the myth of re-enchantment. That is the myth of oneness. That is the reality of where we're at today. This is our world. And we have policies in place. My country, we've been wrestling with trying to ram through a carbon tax. For folks in some parts of the country, they already are experiencing it. Why? Why are we having a carbon tax? Well, we have to be true to Mother Earth, right? Well, we empty your pockets. That's political. But politics and religion does come together. Hey, you've got that going on right now. And so Earth Day comes and we celebrate the mother. We do it with acts of veneration, sacrifices of good works, solemn oaths to her. And our school children do it. And we all do it. And even our churches do this. I'll give you one other quick example from the aspect of environmentalism. The 1992 Rio Earth Summit was the conference that brought together and gave us Agenda 21, the Convention on Climate Change, Convention on Biodiversity. At the closing ceremonies, Boutros Boutros-Ghali, the UN Secretary General, said this, and this is religion. This is re-enchantment. I should like to conclude by saying that the spirit of Rio must create a new form of good citizenship. We must now conclude an ethical and political contract with nature, with this earth to which we owe our very existence. To the ancient, the Nile was a god to be venerated, as was the Rhine, an infinite source of European myths, or the Amazonian forest, the mother of forests. Throughout the world, nature was the abode of the divinities that gave the forest, the desert, or the mountains a personality which commanded worship and respect. The earth had a soul. To find that soul again, to give it new life, that is the essence of Rio. That is re-enchantment. And at the end of the Rio conference, a decision was made that we would create an Earth Charter. And an Earth Charter process was put in motion. It was a declaration of our primacy of the Earth and our involvement in it. Gorbachev likened it to a new type of Ten Commandments. And it was understood it would shift the moral and spiritual values of our world. It was a small document, and what's interesting is the week of 9/11, the week of September, beginning week of September of 2001, when the Twin Towers fell, the charter was put in a special case. The charter was put in an ark. They called it the Ark of Hope, and it was carried from Vermont to New York City, where it was deposited. I believe it was in the Interfaith Center of New York. This is religion. This is religion. You take your new Ten Commandments, you put it in an ark, a holy structure or item, and you carry it as if it somehow has some type of sacred quality to New York, and you deposit it at the Interfaith Center. Politics and religion. This is re-enchantment. This is the world saying, we're giving you a new redemption story. This is our version of redeeming the planet. Whereas Christ says, no, it is my blood, cross, my resurrection that redeems the world, not your actions. Quickly, I know we're going to be running out of time soon. How about the aspect of materialism, mystical materialism? How does that play into it? Well, transhumanism, I contend, demonstrates what this looks like. Transhumanism is the idea that through our science and our technology, we can grab hold of evolution and we can change ourselves in the image we project into what we want to be. And so it is a combination of all kinds of interesting technologies, from brain-computer interfacing to the concepts of uploading your consciousness. The list goes on. Advanced robotics. There's an amazing array of technologies that point to some future where technology becomes our form of salvation. I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples before I get into one event. This idea has been around for a long time. I have a complete chapter devoted to the history of the transhumanist movement in its modern context. What's interesting is the Esalen Institute, which is located south of San Francisco, and by the way, Esalen was the gateway for the East to come to the West in the 1960s, and then in the 1980s was very involved in bringing Russians, the Soviets, and Americans behind closed doors into a working kind of a relationship. One of the workshops took place in 1995 at Esalen, entitled Machine, Dreams, and Techno-Shamanism. Because that's what this is. This is a form of techno-paganism. Consider what the workshop title and its description tells us. This is techno re-enchantment. Is information immortal? What unexplored realms of spirit will we encounter with amazing new forms of computer and electronic hypermedia? New myths will be needed. New mysteries will be encountered. How can ancient models of mind, such as shamanism, Hinduism, or voodoo, help us comprehend silicon-based consciousness? Why are neuroenhancers crucial tools for so many computer innovators? Can humans share an erotic relationship with a machine being? Are Earth spirits at play in fields of photons and electronic spin? A neo-psychedelic subculture is co-evolving with new technologies to reveal glimpses of exotic futures. Oh yes, this wraps it up very, very well. It is spiritual. It is material. It is mystical. It is us enchanting ourselves, even as our technologies are coming forward to say, look what we can do. That's where our boast lies. Mark Peace, he is an innovator of virtual reality and the World Wide Web, put it this way in his documentary, Becoming Transhuman. Once the genome was transcribed, once we knew what had made us human, we had in that moment passed into the transhuman. Knowing our codes, we can recreate them in our so-called synthetic rows of ones and zeros, artificial life. And now we have discovered the multiverse, where nothing is true and everything is permissible. And now we will reach into the improbable, resequence ourselves into a new being, debugging the natural state, translating ourselves into supernatural, incorruptible, eternal. There is no God but man. This is just Genesis 3 repackaged in a techno-paganism, in a techno-shamanism. We are saving ourselves. We are gods. We are now one with our machines. It is all one. There is nothing true. There is nothing solid. On the twoist side, we see something true and solid. God who does not change. It's this. It's fluid. It's non-binary. It's all oneness. It's oneness even with our machines. I saw what this looked like in a significant way when I went to the Global Future 2045 Congress in 2013 in New York City. And there we discussed what our future would look like in a transhuman context, what the world would be as we took evolution in hand and as we directed cosmic evolution, personal evolution, species evolution. We would all become super beings. And so we had all kinds of interesting technologies demonstrated to us. Robotic hands. We had some incredible displays of robotics. Dr. Shuguru brought his Geminoid double of himself, his robotic double. What's interesting is just this year, just February of this year, like only a few weeks back, literally only a few weeks back, Dr. Shuguru unveiled his Buddha mother goddess deity in a 400-year-old Japanese temple. There's a Buddhist temple in Japan. They wanted a techno being, literally a techno being, an embodiment in technology of the Buddha. And this Buddha had its connections into the concepts of the goddess. And so Dr. Shuguru built this structure, this Geminoid robotic structure. And I've got a picture at home, and I should have brought it. It was a press image, a press picture of these Buddhist monks in worship to the mechanical being. As the mechanical being, Dr. Shuguru's invention is now imparting Buddhist wisdom. Welcome to your brave new world, your age of re-enchantment. At the end of the Congress, we had an interfaith panel because religion is important. This is all part of it. And so we had representatives from Buddhism and Hinduism and Christianity and Judaism. We had different people from around the world at this Congress. It was a really important event. And a lot of discussion about what religion would look like in a new age of what is ultimately techno-shamanism or techno-paganism. This is just some of the language that came out from the conversation. We will form a race of God-men and develop a godlike civilization. One of the, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, one of the Hindu representatives said, "You are the light. You are the truth. You are the beginning. You are the end." I'm sorry. You are a plagiarizer. You are a plagiarizer, because I know who said those things first, and you didn't. No. You are not all of these things. I know the statement, the author of those statements, the claim being made. And when you take, as this gentleman did, and place it within ourselves and said, look, we can become divine, we are divine, you've just plagiarized for the wrong purpose. But this is just an example. Technology and religion. This is us enchanting ourselves. I appreciate what Jaron Lanier has to say. Jaron Lanier was one of the pioneers of virtual reality, a brilliant thinker. And he offered a warning in his book, You're Not a Gadget, which is almost like a manifesto for us and our concerns we have as our technologies now dictate reality, at least in our minds. This is what he had to say. But if you want to make the transition from the old religion, where you hope God will give you an afterlife, to the new religion, where you hope to become immortal by getting uploaded into a computer, then you have to believe that information is real and alive. So for you, it will be important to redesign human institutions like art, the economy, and the law to reinforce the perception that information is alive. You demand that the rest of us live in your narrow conception of a state religion. You need us to deify information to reinforce your faith in technology. We have entered the age of re-enchantment. We are building the temple of man in this age of re-enchantment, where we say we're all one together, where we say we're all one with nature, where we are all one with divinity. What does this look like? Let's break this down really quick as we wrap it up. Biblical Christianity is rejected as irrelevant, outdated, and even dangerous. We'll be talking a little bit about that as we look at the interfaith movement tomorrow. Rigid materialism and militant secularism is rejected because that too is something that has been viewed as stripping the soul. So now we have new polling categories like we're spiritual but not religious. We've all heard that. We probably even have friends and family who've said that. Oh, I'm spiritual but not religious. Well, welcome to re-enchantment. We adopt pagan myth into academia, into science, into politics, into our cultural arena. We are now all about Mother Earth and interdependence in the living cosmos. Eastern spiritual practices is what we now gravitate to. We even put it into our church. We do holy yoga, or we do other mythical practices like walking a labyrinth. Our loyalties are now to the earth, to the cosmos, to our evolution. We become global citizens, and it becomes emotionally driven. It is the power of the emotional mob, and we are all looking for that experience of spirituality. We yearn for a feeling of spirituality, and the churches are doing the exact same thing. And we integrate our science and our technology as what we are really doing is creating a type of techno-shamanism or techno-paganism as we proclaim we are all one. And yes, the Christian world is following suit. Barna and Summit recently did a survey, 2017, where they asked a question about, all right, where do practicing Christians fit with this new spirituality? Here's what they discovered in 3 categories. This is regarding practicing Christians. 28% of practicing Christians say that they pray to the same God or Spirit, no matter what name they use for that spiritual being. That all people pray to the same God or Spirit, no matter what that name is. Really? No. It is Christ alone. As he says in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. 27% say that meaning and purpose comes from becoming one with all that is. Really? Almost 30% of practicing Christians says that our meaning and purpose is becoming one? No. It's about finding the truth in the God who is distinct, holy, and other. That is where we find our meaning and purpose. And then 32% said of practicing Christians in your country said that if you do good, you will receive good. If you do bad, you will receive bad. No, the law of karma, which we all accept as somehow being true, is false. So what's our church response? Not reaction, response. We have to formulate a response. First, we need to rediscover our first love and acknowledge him as God, as unique, distinct, and holy. We need to get back to an understanding as basic as it is of the otherness of God. That is paramount. Second, we need to clean up our own act. As we all of a sudden bow our knees in fear to him, we have to clean up our own act. We need to clean up our own idols of oneness. And then third, we need to equip the saints. And in part, what we're doing here today, I'm hoping will help you formulate in your own mind how we need to equip the saints. And finally, your response to your family, to your friends, to your community, to your congregations, you are the ambassador of the God who is other in an era of re-enchantment. Look for those opportunities to be that ambassador. Wisdom says this: trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. He will make your paths straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord. Shun evil. Let's take that to heart. What is the call of the Christian ambassador? I'm going to be repeating this tomorrow night as we look at a model of how to do evangelism in a pagan culture. Psalm 96 says this. It really is the Old Testament Great Commission. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Proclaim the good news of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his wonders among all peoples. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your duty as being an ambassador, a legal and official representative of the King of Kings in the pagan culture, in the culture we have right now. Thank you so much for coming this morning, and I hope we have some time to have conversations later. And I'll just ask Tim if he would be willing to come up and close it off.